right.
Alrighty then.
Well, welcome to Hip and Humble. I'm Aram.
And I'm Mom.
And we talk about all things antique and collectibles. And we are continuing to talk about antique photos this week. Well, those are awesome. And we are supported by Hip and Humble Antiques, LLC. We've got 2 locations. One just outside of Oklahoma City in Bethany, Oklahoma at the Rink Gallery. And another one in downtown Fredericksburg, Virginia at Oldies But Goodies. We also are supported by the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. It's a national online radio network with tons of great content and creators. Check them out. Also, we are talking about antique photos, and last week we introduced the revolution in photography that happened in the 30s, and how National Geographic was one of the big publications at the time that funded a lot of the explorative photos and photographers who were really the explorers of their time.
Well, yeah, I definitely were. I mean, and they really brought the world to people, you know?
They brought the world together in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, they really did.
You know, they kind of gave the rest of the world life in other people's eyes.
Yeah, I mean, you got a little taste of other cultures.
I mean, if you think about it now, kids nowadays, they see, television and movies that have all kinds of different creatures and animals and this and that, but prior to a lot of these photographers and videographers taking video of all of these different animals, you either saw them at the zoo or you just heard about them or read about them in books. And
yeah, if you
could get a book that talked about the different kinds of animals.
Oh yeah,
or you only really knew about your local flora and fauna.
Sure. Sure.
And these different cultures and different people were only ideas or concepts written down in books. Where other people had supposedly gone out, and you just kind of had to trust these other people's words. Like there was a gentleman who wrote a piece, and this is a little convoluted as to its relation to the topic at hand. But there was a gentleman that wrote a piece that he titled. It's America spelled backwards is what it is. And, they had brought him through the Nobel Prize ranks, before his paper because they thought he had discovered a new culture of people. And that was one of the qualifications to win the Nobel Prize at that year. And he finally had to tell him, like, no, it was just it was an observational piece on the culture of the United States. I just spelled America backwards. But I say that to say that the majority of people that were exploring had the means to explore, and the people that were writing about where they had been had the means to do that, and so they had their own biases, and you kind of had to trust that what they were saying to you was true about whatever people they were viewing, because they're coming into, like, if an explorer goes to Antarctica and says that there's people there, and
all right. I mean, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Run up there?
You go to Antarctica and prove them wrong? Not really.
Well, most people won't. Some people are pig-headed enough that they would.
Some people would, and that's why that's why our culture has developed past that point. But prior to that, if you wanted to, you basically had to trust the information that was around you.
Right. Well, and that's kind of what we do now, except now we kind of learn not to trust the information around us.
Now we
just don't know what.
Now we have so much information, it's hard to, we have so much information and it's so readily available that we have to constantly be checking information with multiple sources.
Absolutely.
That's the only real path forward, because if you're going to take everything at face value, there are videos and pictures of certain things happening, and then there will be legitimate articles from published news sources that say, oh, well, this picture that shows this exact thing is not true. It's like, okay. Yeah, my eyes are deceiving me when I see the picture. Understood. So it's a give and take. You, like I said, the only real path forward is to be.
I think we're way more cynical now.
I think cynicism is historically prevalent.
Yeah. I was showing Aram a picture of a photographer. We had been talking
Mm-hmm.
about last time about photographers that would hang on the planes or be strapped to the planes. And this is a National Geographic from May of 1931.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the author in the open cockpit after a sub-zero flight.
Wow.
So, because they didn't,
It's incredible.
yeah. So, with the plane flying over vast ice fields at altitudes exceeding 20,000 feet, the man who handles the camera endures extraordinary hardships. I bet he does.
I bet he does, yeah. Goodness gracious.
Cannot imagine.
No. But when I say I think his cynicism is prevalent throughout historically, I think that it is prevalent throughout history. I think it is I think maybe there is more or less cynicism in different periods throughout history, but I think cynicism is just a part of human nature.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's been around forever. Maybe there is more cynicism now because there is so much information that we have to weed through constantly. Possibly, but I don't think cynicism. I would never say that cynicism or the prevalence or the amount of cynicism is a new thing.
No, it's not.
No. But so Mom's going through these National Geographic magazines now because we were talking in our last episode about some of the photography that had been taken and kind of the revolution in photography that happened between after the 1930s with a couple of prominent photographers of the time.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about Aram had seen one where they had strapped the photographer to like the top of a biplane to get some pictures. And this little article was, it's kind of going through talking about this photographer. I don't know as it says his name, but this photographer that was getting out of an open air plane, like, it has no top on it, to take some pictures and stuff. But, he's going through talking about how the, his oxygen tube had to have it open, but it's a very small tank, so he can't, it's going to run out. So he's got to kind of, what is that? Uses oxygen sparingly.
Yeah. He has to, it's kind of like if you're diving, you have to use your oxygen only when you really need it because you only have a limited amount.
Yeah. And it goes through talking about how, what to look for if your oxygen is going out of your body.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's kind of really pretty neat, kind
It's
of
definitely interesting.
tell them what they go through just to get the picture. So this photographer, particular one, was taking pictures of the Andes.
Wow.
Andes Mountains.
The Andes Mountains. I read the other day that the Appalachian Mountains are actually the oldest mountains in the world. So
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah. So they were one of the oldest, the first mountain formations before Pangea had split.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it says, it's talking here about a flight at some of the lower altitudes and stuff. But, scores of trips over the towering Andes have made this airplane mechanic somewhat blasé, but his precarious perch on the narrow back of a countryman's donkey provides his new thrill in life.
Wow. Man, that's some good writing too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's some great writing.
Some really, really good writing in there.
But if you go through and you look at a lot of these photos,
they're
the crispness of them is just
incredible.
Spectacular. They really are.
Well, and I'm sure they had to do multiple passes over days and weeks to get the specific lighting. And so on, because a lot of it back then was the waiting game because they didn't have the technology to get that clear, crisp photo. They had to get the lighting. They didn't have external lighting for their lenses where they could use to manipulate the light. They had to wait for that specific lighting to hit that at that exact time.
Chrysler apparently came out with a new car also.
Very cool.
I love old ads too.
Old ads
I really
are pretty
do.
cool.
I love a lot of the old ads.
Well, they were an art all in of themselves. I mean, did you?
Here's a Klein Kodak. Make home movies as you go with this $75 Klein Kodak.
$75, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. These jolly people in Switzerland, those charming places in Italy, will they gradually fade from your memory like the receding shores from the stern of your homebound ship? Now that is some writing right there, baby.
They don't advertise like that anymore.
They don't. Well, now you can keep them forever in movies. Movies that you make yourself with a Klein Kodak.
Yes.
Back home, you can enjoy the flicker.
It seemed like then they were introducing every item as like that, the first of this item.
Well, and it was. You know?
I mean, a lot of times it was, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do. I love seeing how they are. But I can kind of tell going through here, cameras were big. That was a new thing that was being brought to people.
Yeah.
So these Barnacle Bill, these are picturesque characters where you are going to be this summer.
Well, and we had kind of touched on it too.
Take along the Graphics. Actually, you know what? I just actually sold one. Last week I sold a Graphics camera. I wish I would have had this little thing to go there, put with it.
That would have been cool.
Dodge has a new car too.
That's before they had the induction system for the Hemi.
Yep, probably so.
Oh no, it definitely was. Yeah,
these are really cool though.
Because that happened later in the 19th century.
Oh yeah, those are really cool.
And we kind of touched on it before, but we were talking about the difference in people's perceptions whenever the kind of photography around war had come out in World War II.
Yeah.
And so at the same time that 35 millimeter cameras were becoming popular, Polaroid introduced the Model 95. The Model 95 used a secret chemical process to develop film inside the camera in less than a minute. So right around that same time in towards the 40s, towards the end of or beginning of the 40s is whenever the Polaroid One Shot came out, and that was huge.
Oh yeah,
huge. Because
sure.
I mean, prior to this, even if you were rich enough to buy a $75 video camera or a Kodak camera at all, you still had to go pay money to a store or a one hour photo developer or what have you to then go and develop your photos. So that's even more money to go get the photos, get them developed, get them framed. So, what have you, however you want to display them. And so these Kodak, the Polaroid the Polaroid picture coming out and being able to have your picture right there, right then and there. I mean, that was huge.
Oh yeah.
That was huge. That was a game changer. I mean, shake it like a Polaroid picture,
Yeah. I remember that.
There's certain technologies, there's certain inventions that change the way we speak.
Well, the photography also pushed the limits because it's like I'm looking here in this, and this is June of 1931.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are they, getting into the aerial photography and stuff, but this is also underwater photography. Yeah. So they had a huge one of those big diving balls.
Wow. And
have gone down in and they're taking pictures of fish. So, I mean, it's a whole new world though that's opened up.
Yeah.
I mean, diving was diving, but I mean, they doubt they had many pictures actual of fish.
Yeah.
But now they got creepy fish.
Yeah. Yeah, they sure do.
I would probably turn around and get my little self on back up.
I'm sure those two were some of the first ever pictures of those fish.
Look at those things.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they weren't ready for their close up.
Probably not. No.
Some of those things, I mean, if I saw that coming at me, I'd be like, okay, back up top we go, and that's where we stay. Oh, and the title of the article is A Round Trip to Davy Jones' Locker.
That is good.
That's priceless.
That is good.
That is good. I like it. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want, like we were saying, like all of these things were happening in succession. I mean, at this time, the French, they were introducing the permanent image. And at that same time, the Japanese brought an easier image control to the photographer. In the late 70s and early 80s, compact cameras that were capable of making image-controlled decisions on their own were introduced.
But they were such a phenomenal invention,
right?
That it's like even in these books, they're taking pictures of of an Ethiopian film star and her cameraman.
Wow!
I mean, the camera itself is just such a
phenomenon
mm-hmm. that really did bring the world together, really brought people together.
Well, and what I was saying earlier is there are certain inventions, technologies, and so on that change our language. They change
Definitely.
the way we speak. And the cameras and photography, those inventions, that technology has changed our culture, has changed our species.
Definitely.
Because it gives us an easier way to glimpse into the past.
Yeah.
So one of the things that has always set,
the past and the future.
Interesting.
I think the future too, because the underwater thing, the first underwater pictures here and stuff, that's a future. That's like whole new career fields.
Yeah.
That's going to spark somebody's interest in getting down there and figuring out how to study these fish. Study their habitat, study, marine biology. Probably
they're inspiration for future.
Yeah,
I see what you mean.
Inspiration for marine biologists around the world.
For sure. But I think one of the things that set our species apart from others, in general, is the fact that we are able to look in retrospect and introspectively, and we also understand that we understand long-term consequences. That's another big thing. The other smarter species like dolphins and chimpanzees and things like that, they don't plan for the future, or they don't plan because of things that have happened in the past. They are cultural. They make decisions and they have long memories. So I guess I'll redact that and say that they do make decisions based on learned past mistakes, but their collective experience they don't use a collective experience. They use communication and they use personal experience to.
Sure. But I think photography really, kind of became another tool to progress a lot of different career fields.
Well, I'm just saying not only just career fields, but human intellect.
Absolutely.
I think that not only, like I said, intellect was progressed whenever photography became more readily available, whenever it switched from a staged piece or a staged phenomenon to something that could really be utilized as the tool in art that it is to kind of paint a picture, for lack of a better term, of our culture, of our world.
Oh yeah.
That opened people's eyes to the fact that all of these other things, one, do really exist, and two, there's tangible proof of all of these things existing.
Oh yeah.
And being able to tangibly prove all of this at once gives you a heightened sense of confidence in the information that you know.
Oh yeah.
What was it? Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," but that was a huge concept in his time. But moving past that, in that same philosophy, he recognized the fact that as a conscious being, he couldn't tangibly or definitively say that anything around him was real. But he was able to deduce by his consciousness being there that he was, whether he was, what he was up for debate. But the fact that photography exists and that there are these tangible pieces of pictures of these times and snapshots in the past, it allows us to so it solidifies.
It allows us to really have a record of our world.
Right.
I forgot which president it was, after the Holocaust, and he sent him in and he said, take as many pictures as you possibly can, because later generations will not believe this actually happened.
Yep.
And,
and they already don't.
Well, they already don't. Yeah, they don't, which generally means we're going to repeat that atrocity.
Yep.
But that, that's very important. It documents. Mm-hmm. It documents our world.
Yeah.
And I will say a lot of people will believe these photos in these 1930s, 20s, 30s magazines over a photo that was taken yesterday, because these aren't doctored.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have the technology to edit them.
They did not have the technology to do that. So, to me, these are a lot more true form or true documentation of our world at that time than really what we do now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes and no, because original photos now still do exist, but it's harder to determine whether something is an original photo unless you're the one that took it.
Well, yeah.
But that's not to say that original photos don't exist now.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Or when I say original photos, I mean photos that where external things were not added in during the editing process.
Right.
Or external entities or other scenery or things were not added into the photo to distort it from what it originally captured. So that's all that means. And we're going to talk some more about that when we come back from our break.
Hi, my name is Kaylin, and I'm the host of a new podcast called Tea Time Thoughts. Do you ever wish you could learn more about history, books, music, art, and culture, but you just don't know where to start? I totally feel your pain. Learning about all these things can be so overwhelming. Well, I want to change all of that for you. In my podcast, Tea Time Thoughts, I'll show you just how fun it all can be. In the time it takes to have a cup of tea, I'm going to teach you everything from the French Revolution to the Black Plague, Mozart to Broadway musicals, Da Vinci to Robert Frost, ancient Egypt to Queen Elizabeth II, and more. You can stream Tea Time Thoughts wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So what are you waiting for? Put the kettle on and listen to Tea Time Thoughts today.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Hip and Humble. I'm still Aaron.
And I'm Mom.
And we are still talking about antique photos. And we are still supported by Hip and Humble Antiques, LLC. If you're not following us on Instagram, I'm a little hurt still, but I'll get over it. Please follow us. It's hipn.humble. Follow us on Instagram at hipn.humble. And go ahead and comment. Send us a message. I'm on there all the time, so I'll respond. And just let us know what you would like to hear or what you're interested in or any antiques you want us to look for, and we'll make sure and get them up. Also, if you really like what we're doing, please consider leaving us a tip on Patreon. That's patreon.com/hipandhumble. And we are also supported by the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. They play us twice a week, and they are awesome. So you guys check out all their other shows and content creators. All right, so still going through these National Geographic magazines because they are a blast and a half.
Yeah, they really are pretty cool. I think they're really neat.
Well, we started getting into those before. I mean, I remember you buying those.
Well,
a long time ago.
I don't know 4 or 5 boxes of them at one point, but then we had a flood down here, and some of them were on the floor. So I know this box is right here. There may be another. Oh, there's some more right there. I can see in that cabinet right there. So there's probably more tucked away here and there. I was kind of looking to see if I had any from like the 40s and stuff, but these all are from the 1920s.
Yeah, these are 1930. These ones right here.
Well, these are 1929.
We might have some from the 40s.
Kind of whenever. I mean, this was a long, long time ago. So kind of whenever I was buying a lot of these. This was from an auction. So, I would generally try to pick ones from the years that I had family members that were born.
Right.
So 1929, 28, my Uncle Lonnie was born. 1930, my Aunt Betty was born. 40, my dad, and 42, my mom. But like I said, some of them were lost to the water. So,
yep.
Yep. What are you going to do?
Yeah, not much you can do in that situation.
But I do love going through these. I love going through a lot of old magazines or, a lot of that. I just enjoy it. I think it's fun. I love the ads. I love the ads that are in there. Some of them they just crack me up.
Well, it's like I said, a lot of the time they're introducing an item for the first time, and to a national audience,
but it's interesting, the words that they respond to back then versus what we respond to now.
Well, because the words that they respond to back then, if someone were to put that into print now, it would seem corny.
Sure, absolutely.
Because it's been done.
Oh, yeah.
And overdone. I mean, going into the 50s and the admin and Madison Avenue and everything that happened with that. Moving from 30s to 40s to 50s to 60s and 70s advertising. Could you imagine the 70s advertising going on nowadays? Or we saw an advertisement the other day for a Jeep. And it was a 1983 Jeep advertisement. And it was rough.
I'm sure it was.
It was rough.
But 1924.
There you go. But after we were talking about we talked about the Polaroid picture and how that was such a huge deal, and then after that, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, compact cameras that were capable of making image control decisions on their own were introduced. So.
Underwater cameras.
Those
were a big deal.
So what we were talking about earlier with the artists but the photographers having to wait for specific lighting and everything, all the conditions to be perfect to take these photos. A lot of that was because, like I said, the technology they had at the time was not capable of altering any of the elements that the camera was taking pictures of. So they had a lot more
patience.
They had to have a lot more patience. They weren't able to manipulate the light with the camera. They weren't able to. The cameras themselves didn't autofocus. I mean, so these guys that were taking images from planes, they were focusing the lens in real time while in a plane. And I mean, the one we were talking about earlier, he was in sub-zero temperatures over ice fields. So he's freezing, breathing out of an oxygen mask and taking focusing a camera manually and having to take clear photos of a landscape that has never been photographed before. I mean, these guys were rock stars.
Well, I mean, and they're competing.
Yeah, and they're competing.
I mean, it's not like, they're competing for photographs. So they've got to send them in.
Because it's not like there's no guarantee that he's going to get paid for that photo either.
It's true.
Like the National Geographic was paying for the best of the best, and that was it, because that's the budget they had, and that's also the name that they made for themselves. So they could turn anybody away, no matter how prolific of a photographer,
and they still do,
and they still do turn anybody away because they built that name. The National Geographic is the National Geographic for a reason.
That's right.
The thing is whenever you solidify a brand and solidify being the best, and you have tenements of being the best, then if you accept below that, then that's your own fault. You're destroying the legacy, the image that you made. Going in and seeing something through to the end is a lot more memorable than someone who gave up halfway through.
It's true. Very true.
So moving past that, though, in the 1980s and 1990s, numerous manufacturers worked on cameras that stored images electronically. And the first of these were the point-and-shoot cameras that used digital media instead of film. And then we move into modern day where we have digital, we have film, and a lot of these are processed very quickly. There's fewer and fewer film cameras nowadays, unfortunately or fortunately, because the digital tech.
But I will say they kind of come back and forth because I come across, and it's kind of funny because it's like, how do I even get all these cameras? But people collected cameras for a long time, and then when they sell an estate, there'll be 10 cameras in there. And
they still do. There's many camera collectors.
Yeah, so. I have them come in all the time, and they look specifically for film cameras.
Right.
And I will say that is a great way to learn to take pictures.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say too. Is a lot of people who are just getting into photography, they will go back to antique shops and they will look for film cameras to use because they're generally a lot cheaper to buy an antique film camera because these cameras don't break. I mean,
not really. I mean, obviously anything can break.
Yeah, they can, but majority of the cameras that you'll find in antique shops are working cameras, and they still work just as good as they did the day that they were made.
Well, some of them. I mean, not obviously all. Everything is as is, and you need to check it out for yourself.
For sure.
But it's a great way to learn, and they're always buying them.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, antique shops are a really great place to start a hobby. Pretty much any hobby.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
can definitely see that.
Realistically speaking, if you have an interest of any kind, a lot of times you can find something about it or within that world or realm of that hobby, I guess, inside of an antique shop.
Yeah. Definitely.
Realistically speaking.
But cameras are always a big seller.
Yeah, they really
always are. And I do have people coming in asking for very specific cameras. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we have them, sometimes we don't. Yeah. But yeah, they're always a good seller, that's for sure.
Did you know where the word photography came from?
From a guy?
No. Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if it was a guy or a girl. The coining of the word photography is usually attributed to Sir John Herschel in 1839. It's based on the Greek phos, genitive photos, meaning light, and graphe, meaning drawing or writing. Together, it means drawing with light.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Pretty cool. The world's oldest photo was taken by Nicephore Niepce in a commune in France called Saint-Loup-de-Varennes, somewhere between 1826 and 1827.
Okay.
Yeah. So the photos, the way that they were developed or made, earlier photos is actually pretty interesting. We hadn't really talked about that up to this point. The essential elements of the image are usually established immediately at the time of exposure. And we talked a little bit about exposure, and that's the exposure being the amount of light that's taken in by the camera to produce the image. This characteristic is unique to photography, and it sets it apart from other ways of picture making. The seemingly automatic recording of an image by photography has given the process a sense of authenticity shared by no other picture-making technique. The photograph possesses in the popular mind such apparent accuracy that the adage, "the camera does not lie," has become an accepted, if erroneous, cliché.
Because now the camera can lie.
Well, the camera doesn't lie.
Actually,
the editor
lies. I have a girlfriend of mine, and on her phone, she does not have an iPhone. She's got a different phone. Mm-hmm. But she has a thing on her phone, and every time all of us girls are together, that's one of the first things we're doing, like, oh, no, make us skinny. Because it's like some kind of photo thing on her phone, and she can push it and kind of make you thinner.
Oh, the different lenses.
I don't know, but I will say Cherie is my hero.
Yes, yeah. There's different filtered lenses that different camera apps will use now.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And
but that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. And
so it does lie, but not a lot.
Just enough.
Just enough to make us happy.
And that goes back to the etymology of that word, and the coining of that phrase goes back to back to that sentiment that we had talked about earlier in saying that photography is one of those inventions that had changed the way we speak. It changed our language. We reference it in different ways.
Oh yeah.
And it's a standalone point of contention, I suppose, in modern speech. Oh. In 1727, the German professor of anatomy, John Heinrich, he proved that darkening of silver salts, a phenomenon known since the 16th century and possibly earlier, was caused by light and not heat. He demonstrated that fact by using sunlight to record words on the salts, but he made no attempt to preserve the images permanently. He discovered, in combination with the camera obscura provided by the basic technology for photography, it was not later until the 19th century, however, that the photography actually came into being. So that German professor, basically, he made a picture with camera obscura before there were pictures. Before the technology came about, he in that experience made a photo by happenstance, and in doing so made the discovery that light changes things, not just heat.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the best stuff in the world happened by happenstance.
This is true. That is true. Yours truly included.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. So heliography, and we talked about Niaphore Nifsi as the gentleman who took the first photo. He was an amateur inventor, and he lived near Chalon-sur-Saône, a city in 189 miles southeast of Paris. He was interested in lithography, which is a process in which drawings are copied or drawn by hand on a lithographic stone and then printed in ink. Not artistically trained, Nipsey devised a method by which light could draw the pictures he needed. He oiled and engraved to make it transparent and then placed it on a plate coated with a light-sensitive solution of bitumen of Judea, a type of asphalt, and lavender oil, and exposed the setup to sunlight. After a few hours, the solution under the light areas of the engraving hardened, while that under the dark areas remained soft and could be washed away, leaving a permanent, accurate copy of the engraving. Which is interesting because I feel like setting all of that up in advance to experiment would have taken just as much time as it would have for him to have actually redrawn it by hand.
Probably.
So a lot of inventions in human history come out of laziness.
Yeah.
Or the want to make things more efficient.
Oh, that's the fancy word of saying lazy.
That's a good way to say it.
Okay.
And so it seems that he was trying to do these things, but trying to find the most efficient way to do them. Trying to do them without having to do them. He's trying to get paid by doing as little work as possible.
Yeah, I think pretty much that's always been a human trend.
That is a pretty consistent trait. Yeah. So he called his process heliography, sun drawing. So Nipsey succeeded from 1822 onward in copying oiled engravings onto the lithographic stone, glass, and zinc from 1826 onto the pewter plates, and that's what went into the modern photography that we have today. So past that, or before that point actually, there was something called the daguerreotype, which Louis-Jacques Monde Daguerre was a professional scene painter for the theater. Between 1822 and 1839, he was the co-proprietor of the Diorama in Paris, an auditorium in which he and his partner, Charles-Marie Bouton, displayed immense paintings, 45.5 by 71.5 feet, or 14 by 22 meters in size, of famous places and historical events. The partners painted the scenes on translucent paper or muslin, and by the careful use of changing lighting effects were able to present vividly realistic tableaus. The views provided grand illusionistic entertainment, and the amazing trompe-l'oeil effect was purposely heightened by the accompaniment of appropriate music and the positioning of real objects, animals, or people in front of the painted scenery, which I think should be brought back. Like, I think if you were to have a dinner party and you got a really big painting, you just hire an actor or animals to stand in front of that painting to make it more real. I feel like that would be a great time. I feel like that would be such a great time. Like, if you had just people stood acting like they were in a scene. That would be so fun.
I think that would be a fun theme party.
That would be a hoot. That would be a hoot.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
I could see you doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't see it like in, like a Vogue special or anything. I wouldn't see it as like a big cultural event nowadays, but I think it'd be fun to have it'd be an interesting way to have people around. Interesting thing to have while you had everybody around.
It could be.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, back then it was a huge thing because they didn't have movies and television and all that.
They had other forms of entertainment.
Yeah, and I think that being a precursor to the forms of entertainment that we have today is pretty interesting as a precursor.
Oh, that is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it makes sense. Evolutionary, or like if you're thinking of the evolution of entertainment from that period to now, it makes sense in sequence.
Yeah,
because it's kind of people like to entertainment is kind of focused around this escapism. People try to see things that either they want to see or that they wouldn't have been able to see in their current status, or they want to imagine themselves as a certain character, going through different scenes or going through different places that they don't have the capability to go to. And so in this sense, these people creating these big scenes throughout history and then displaying them and having live actors or animals to kind of enrich that scenery or bring it to life, it makes sense that, that would be a form of escapism back then.
Absolutely.
For sure.
People are always looking for ways to escape their daily life.
Yeah. Well, and I think photography in general is one of the key technology. Photography and videography are two of the most prevalent technologies in our culture or in our world that allow us to step outside of ourselves.
Well, and I've heard or read at some point that says, photographers really are like almost introverts in a lot of ways, because they want to be a part of whatever's going on in front of them, but they don't want to be a big part of it. They view life through behind the lens.
Yeah.
So I always kind of, think about that. Remember that when I'm in situations that I don't really want to be in, and I'm like, okay, do I want to view this situation as a photographer, and I'm kind of taking myself out of the situation somewhat, but I'm still have to be, still here, or am I going to be a participant? Am I going to live in this moment, or am I going to just be back here capturing this moment for other people to see later?
As a really great perspective.
So,
and that's a good thought to end on, because we are out of time.
We're out of time. Mm-hmm. Well, and here's a picture of Abraham Lincoln reading his address on his second inauguration, March 4th, 1865.
Incredible.
National Geographic, folks.
Incredible.
They're great. They're great to go through. I love going through them.
Oh, I have quite a lot to ponder, and that was a very, very good thought to think. But before I get too deep into that, stay hip
and humble.
All right, bye now.
Bye.